what do I do when my family, my adult children, my friends are getting swept up in the progressive, independent, fundamental Baptist movement? And I defined what that was in the last video, but a concise definition is that in all manners of separation that could be said to be gray, that they have dropped any of those. And then they're still King James, they still might be dispensational, might not, they have the fundamentals of the faith. So they hold to the Baptist theological doctrines, but in the theological doctrine of separation, they do not have the same definition of those precepts that the other side does. And it can be discouraging. I remember that I saw a large portion of my own generation getting swept up out of a Bible-believing, conservative, separated church, and just really, it was so sad, so sad. And it's been 6 or 7 years since then, and the state of those families is heartbreaking. And when you see that, and you know the end of that road, you know, it's so subtle to move off, because you can see flaws over here. You can see flaws, and they might even be legitimate. And I say this over and over. Every revolutionary can tell you the flaws, but is their solution biblical? Because if it's not biblical, it's not any better. It's just going to lead to different consequences. Kind of like communism. Was there a problem with imperialism and the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, and there was no care or no lovingness in the authorities and the, you know, and the hierarchies and the Catholic Church who ran the governments and the kings who ran the governments, and they didn't care about the people underneath them? And that's true. But was the answer communism? Where does that take you? Is that any better? So it's just this age-old problem of there are issues. Is the solution biblical? Is your solution any better? And then what happens if you know that the solution that they're choosing isn't any better? In fact, it's very often worse. It just, in their life, it hasn't been tried yet. And I could cry talking about this, because if there's one thing that discourages me, it is when I see good people who love the Lord, who are on a path, and I feel helpless. You know, you look at Galatians 6:1 that says, if you see a man overtaken in a fault, meekly go to them. You know, get the beam out of your own eye, meekly go to them. And sometimes you want to be like David Cloud, who's like, I have the ministry of being the watchman on the tower, and I just want to shout it out and point out who's doing what. And I don't necessarily know if that's biblical or not biblical. I'm not gonna talk about that, but I can understand of wanting to be like, don't you realize where you're going and where it's going to take you? And I feel like, as a wife, one of the biggest issues that young wives and sometimes older wives have is when you see something that looks awful and terrifying, and you're like, Abraham is going to take me to Egypt, and I'm going to be taken as the wife to the king. And you are helpless to do anything. And I was telling my husband this week about something that I really do have a lot of faith that when somebody wants to do right, and they're facing a mountain, and they're facing their own life's patterns and habits and strongholds, but they want to do what's right, God will absolutely give them the strength and the power to overcome those strongholds. But me personally, you read the Bible and you see scripture and you see the Israelites and how much God gave them and how he tried to chastise them and how much he did. You know, Calvinism isn't real because God has a will and so many people disobey it. And when somebody has a heart to do wrong, I just really have a hard time believing that they'll do anything but what they want to do. Hey, that was an exciting, encouraging 5 minutes, right? But I'm just telling you, I understand. I understand, and my heart breaks for it. And then there was this meme that said when somebody says, all I can do is pray, and you feel really discouraged that all you can do is pray. They say, you don't understand what prayer is. You have the ear of the one who's in control. And I have to remind myself that God has the hearts of kings, and power belongeth to God. And God even made the wicked for himself for the day of evil. And God allows bad things to happen to people to try their hearts to see, will he turn towards them and will he seek their face? And God allows really good things to happen to people to see if they will follow after the wickedness of their heart or if they'll seek after his face. I have to remember that God is bigger than me. And if you are a wife or if you are a parent of adult children, especially if you're the parent of adult children, you had those children for 18 years. And if you taught them what was right those 18 years, and then they chose to do something different, it is discouraging, but you probably can't do anymore. They are adults. They know what you believe. They know what you taught them. And they are God's children. It's different than a peer talking to a peer when you're an adult, because your peer didn't raise you for 18 years. They might have a way to say something that the parent hasn't already tried. But when you're a parent, you really just only can pray. Saying something's going to cause more harm than good. They're just going to dig in their heels. And the same thing is true with husbands. I get ladies who say, how do I encourage my husband to? And then they lay out a very true and good thing. How do I influence him to? How do I inspire him to? And I just say, so what I hear you saying is, how do I change them to do what I want them to do without appearing like I'm trying to control them? I get it. And that is why in that video on YouTube that I have a series on marriage, I say the very first most important thing you need to know to be a better wife is how to trust God. When you see somebody doing something really awful and you are afraid. And the principle is true for parents of adult children. Principle is true for wives of people who aren't doing what's right. The principle is true when you have talked to your peers and they look at you like you're the enemy and they walk off the cliff anyway. I'm gonna cry. This is why I say just keep on. Because somebody a long time did this video, what to do when my children are prodigals, and they said, don't blame yourself. And stay at Bethel. Because when that person walks through the valley and they realize that they're on sinking sand, and when they do reap what they sow, and it's heartbreaking, they know where to come back to. And they'll see that the fruits of the Bible were true the whole time. And just pray that God will convict their hearts. Pray that they'll have ears to hear. Pray that your walk and manner of life will be such that they look and say, I remember back when. I don't really have much more than that. Keep being faithful. You will give account for you. And they will give account for them. And if they are ready to hear, and if they are ready to learn, and you're where you need to be, they'll look and say, who can I ask the questions to? Oh, yes, there's hope. So continue to live in a way that gives hope.